Every country has its own specialties. We seem to be fascinated by UFOs right now. But one thing...
What is that? Before you leave UFOs, tell me about you and Professor Mack.
John Mack is a professor of psychiatry at Harvard, who I've known for many years. We were arrested together at the Nevada nuclear test site protesting U.S. testing in the face of a Soviet moratorium on testing. And many years ago, he asked me, what is there in this UFO business? Is there anything to it? And I said, absolutely nothing, except, of course, for a psychiatrist. He is a psychiatrist. Well, he looked into it and decided that there was so much emotional energy in the reports of people who claimed to be abducted that it couldn't possibly be some psychological aberration, that it had to be true. He believed his patients. I do not believe his patients. Many of these stories are about waking up from a deep sleep and finding your bed surrounded by 3 or 4 short, dour, gray, and sexually obsessed beings, who then take you to their spaceship after they slither you through your wall and perform a variety of objectionable sexual experiments.
But here we have Dr. Carl Sagan, astronomer, versus Dr. what's his first name?
Mack.
John Mack. MD.
No question. So what's the problem?
How could... He's a scientist.
How can scientists disagree?
He's a scientist.
Is that what you're asking?
No, I'm asking how could... I mean, what do you think of this man coming to these conclusions?
I think he is not using the scientific method in approaching his issue.
And when you constantly... I mean, I assume you come at him with both barrels in conversation.
And in the demon-haunted world.
And he says?
He says, I don't appreciate the emotional force...
You don't?
...of these reports. But many people awaken from a nightmare with profound emotional force. That doesn't mean that the nightmare is true. It means something went on inside our head.
Plus, if aliens are on their way, do you know how many telescopes we have pointing up to the night sky?
Right.
Do you realize how much the night sky is being monitored by people other than human beings? Also, do you realize we have cameras pointing downward? You know, Google Earth are downward pointing cameras. Okay? All right? If aliens are landing and taking off, we would have footage.
Secondly, my brother-in-law is a highly classified person that works for the Air Force. The question revolves around what your belief is in UFOs. He's told me some things that I can't repeat about the Roswell incident. Perhaps you could give us your thoughts on that.
Let's start with the last one first.
Sure.
Okay, Dr.
Okay, but I don't want to duck the first one.
Okay, we'll get...
Well, in 1947, in near Roswell, New Mexico, stuff came down on a ranch, and the stuff was then picked up by Air Force personnel. People apparently were told to keep quiet about it, and over the years, the story has emerged that these were parts of a crashed alien spacecraft, and that little alien bodies were shipped to an Air Force base in Ohio, and that they're still languishing in freezers with their perfect teeth. The actual fact seems to be that, as the Air Force announced very belatedly just a couple of years ago, that this was a balloon at tropopause altitudes, that is just where the stratosphere begins, with acoustic instruments designed to detect Soviet nuclear weapons explosions from halfway around the world. There is an acoustic channel at the tropopause by which you might be able to hear such explosions. And this was a matter of the highest concern for the security of the United States and was properly classified. Newspaper photographs at the time show flimsy polyethylene-like material and balsa wood, hardly consistent with the spacecraft of an alien advanced civilization, but perfectly consistent with balloons. I think that, there are two museums of UFOs in Roswell, New Mexico. You can make money, you can get your name in the paper, you can have a break from the humdrum day by inventing stories about Roswell, New Mexico. I don't know what your brother has told you, but I would treat it with a real grain of salt.
Does that mean you don't believe in UFOs?
Well, what do we mean by believe, which in fact takes us to the first question. So what do we mean by believe? If the evidence is compelling, then we believe. If the evidence is not compelling, we don't believe. We withhold judgment. And UFOs merely is an abbreviation for unidentified flying objects. If we see something in the sky, we don't know what it is. To my mind, that's it. We don't know what it is. It does not automatically follow that it's spacecraft from somewhere else. The vast majority of UFO reports have quite prosaic explanations. It's partly people seeing natural phenomena in the sky with which they're unfamiliar, including cases of astronomers doing that. Sometimes conscious hoaxes, sometimes people with who hallucinate, and 25% of all people hallucinate. So there are many other explanations, and only if you've been able to eliminate all of those explanations would you give serious consideration to the possibility that we're being visited. Nobody's more interested than me in the possibility of the existence of extraterrestrial life. I've been involved in sending spacecraft to other planets to look for it. I've been involved in using large radio telescopes to listen for signals from civilizations on planets of other stars. It would save me so much effort if the aliens were here, even if they are short, doer, and sex-obsessed, as the alien abductees, so-called, claim.
And before we lose...
But I disagree with Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking. I have no fear of artificial intelligence because we're already exposed to artificial intelligence.
Sure.
A computer beat us at chess. A game we invented. We put our best chess player, the computer smoked him. All right? Our best Jeopardy player got smoked by another computer. Okay? And so, was that the end of civilization? Did people say, oh my gosh, what will happen to us? And this has been going on since the Industrial Revolution.
Well,
we have machines replacing our body, computers replacing our mind. We've been doing it ever since the beginning.
But
All right, Neil.
But you're cherry picking an easy example, the chess game. I mean, come on, that holds no threat to us, but there are other things that would.
The thing about chess is that it's a domain which is very carefully defined, and it's much more difficult to have an artificial intelligence which can handle anything you throw at it, anything in real life. But it will come, I'm sure.
Let me ask you, Richard, with artificial intelligence mimicking the human mind, we have a lot of neurological baggage from our evolutionary past. Is that baggage, which most of the time is not functioning rationally or logically, is that the source of our creativity? And if that's the case, now you program a computer as complex as ever you do, but it's still according to a prescribed code. So can a computer ever be as inventive as a human being?
You could build in a certain random element. I mean, that would do it if it was filtered through.
You have to program in the randomness.
Yeah, but randomness filtered through some interesting circuitry could come out as imaginative curiosity.
You guys ought to do a buddy cop movie. You solve crimes
and the problems of the universe.
I and a few of my colleagues have spent a fair amount of time trying to find some evidence for intelligent life on Earth. By and large, we've been unsuccessful. Let me explain. Here are some photographs of the planet Earth taken by the American meteorological satellite ATS-1. The white stuff is clouds, the dark stuff is the surface of the Earth, in this case the Pacific Ocean. And as you see, there's no sign of life. Now, here is a photograph of the British Isles, and you can see this is a fairly rare photograph, rare because the British Isles are largely cloud-free. Now, prolonged scrutiny of this photograph reveals no sign of life. This is a photograph taken at 1 kilometer resolution. That is to say that things smaller than a kilometer would not possibly show up in this picture. Here's a photograph at the same resolution of France. Somewhere in this picture, I've forgotten just where, is Paris. Paris doesn't show up because there's nothing about Paris that calls it to our attention. You can't see Paris at this sort of resolution. Well, we've looked at several thousands of photographs with this sort of resolution, and we've come to the conclusion that at kilometer resolution, there's no sign of life on Earth, intelligent or otherwise. To get a good sign of intelligent life on Earth, we have to get pictures of improved resolution. Now, here's a rare photograph of the Earth at a resolution of about 1/10 of a kilometer. It's the only one of several thousands which shows with any reasonable degree of certainty, intelligent life on the Earth. I call your attention to this remarkable array of quite straight and parallel, and here we have at right angles to them crossing straight lines. Now what can this possibly be? I think even if you don't have an immediate feeling as to what it is, it's clearly biological and not geological, and you'd be right. This is a photograph taken near Cochrane, Ontario in Canada. This is lumber country. The loggers have cut parallel swaths through the forest, and then the snow fell, heightening the contrast. But this is an exceedingly rare photograph, and to get really good signs of life on Earth, we would have to improve the resolution by another factor of 10 or 100. So, despite all our feelings that man has profoundly remade the surface of the Earth, we see that at least at this kind of resolution, the Earth is essentially the same as it was hundreds of millions of years ago before man or his ancestors ever evolved. It is a mind-reeling thought to think of the information that might one day come fluttering through our radio telescopes from an advanced civilization somewhere else. Any communication, I think, will be mostly from them to us, because they will have very little to learn from us and probably an enormous amount to teach us, not just in areas of science, but in other areas, some of which we can only dimly guess at today. I don't share George Wald's fears that such a contact would be a disaster. I think rather it's a supreme opportunity to learn something. But in any case, we can't hold back. We've already communicated our presence to the universe, because about 30 or 40 light years away from the Earth, there's a wave front of electromagnetic radiation which is moving away from us at the speed of light. This is the result of our first large-scale radio communications back in the 20s and 30s, and there's no holding that back. That indicates our presence. We've already communicated our presence to the universe.
What do you think are the odds that there is life elsewhere in the universe?
They must be high, and I'll tell you why. People say, well, have you found life yet? No. Well, that's like going to the ocean. This has been said before, taking a cup of water, scooping up and saying, there are no whales in the ocean, you know? Here's my data, you know? You need a slightly bigger sample. And so if you look at, for example, what we call the radio bubble, this is the sphere around Earth, centered on Earth, which is the farthest our radio signals have reached in the galaxy. And they're about 70 light years away. We've been transmitting radio signals inadvertently leaking into space for about 70 years. 70 light year radius sphere. Well, how big is the galaxy? Well, shrink that sphere down to maybe the size of a BB, and then the galaxy on that scale would be the size of this stage. That's how far our radio signals have traveled. And those aren't even the ones we sent on purpose. The ones we sent on purpose have traveled much less. So no, we haven't actually reached as far into the galaxy as we'd like before we would say definitively that there's no one intelligent living today. But here's some very simple facts. I can review them in 90 seconds. You look at the formation of the Earth and the earliest sign of fossil life. Subtract a few hundred million years at the beginning of Earth, when Earth was a shooting gallery. Earth was still accreting the birth materials of the solar system. It's hostile to complex chemistry over that time. Not fair to start the clock then. Wait a couple 100 million years, now start the clock, and wait around and see when you have the first signs of single-celled life. At most, 400 million years. At most. Earth has been around for 4.5 billion? So Earth without any help from us, with basic ingredients found throughout the universe, managed to create life, simple though it was. So, and Earth, one of, 8 planets, get over it. One of, sorry. Earth, an ordinary star, to suggest, and what are the ingredients of life? The number 1 atom in your body is hydrogen. Number 2 atom is oxygen, together making mostly water that's in you. Next is carbon in this order. Next is nitrogen. Next is other stuff. My favorite element, other, yeah. You look at the universe, the number 1 element in the universe is hydrogen. Next is helium, chemically inert, couldn't do anything with it anyway. Next is carbon. I think I left out oxygen there. Next is oxygen. Next is nitrogen, 1 for 1. We're not even made of odd things. The most common things in the universe are found here on Earth, and we're made of them. And carbon, one of the most chemically fertile element on the periodic table. It's not a surprise, we're carbon-based. Life is just the extreme expression of complex chemistry. So that's what biology is. So all these people who want to imagine, because they remembered their chemistry class that silicon sits right below carbon on the periodic table. So it bonds similarly to carbon, so they want to imagine silicon-based life. I'm saying, okay, fine, but you don't have to. There's 5 times as much carbon in the universe as silicon. There's no need to even have to go there. We got enough to imagine just simply with the carbon atom at the center of these huge biological molecules. Point is, it happened relatively quickly with the most common ingredients in the universe. To now say life on Earth is unique in the universe would be inexcusably egocentric.
That's inevitable that humans would project their hopes and fears upon the cosmos. The standard Hollywood attempts are to portray the extraterrestrials as red of claw and fang, pointed heads and nasty dispositions. Steven Spielberg has made an important step forward, E.T. and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, to show the possibility of benign extraterrestrials, but even there, the extraterrestrials are only slight variants on human beings when the evolutionary record is clear that extraterrestrials would be very different from us. And also, they're not awfully smart, his extraterrestrials.
Sweet, but not smart.
Sweet, but not smart.
Yeah.
If you look at timescales, you realize that our civilization is the most backward civilization in the galaxy that could communicate at all, because we've just invented radio telescopes just a few decades ago. We had not the ghost of a chance of communicating with anybody else. So if we receive a message, it can't be from anybody less capable than we, because anybody less capable can't communicate at all. So it has to be somebody much in advance of us, and maybe as much in advance of us as we are in advance of the ants, say, or the worms.
You, Carl Sagan, scientist, astronomer, enlightened man, you think that indeed there may be some sort of intelligence out there?
May, surely may. We now realize an enormous number of planets, a range of planetary systems around nearby stars. So there's a lot of potential abodes for life. That's one thing. Then there's the question of organic matter, the carbon-rich complex molecules that are essential for the kind of life we know about are fantastically abundant. They litter the universe. We see them in asteroids and comets and the moons in the outer solar system, and even in the cold, dark spaces between the stars. So the stuff of life is everywhere. And then there's time. There are billions of years for biological evolution on all those worlds. There are many worlds that are much older than ours. So you put those together, lots of places, lots of organic matter, lots of time, and it seems very hard to believe that our paltry little planet is the only one that's inhabited.
You know, the phrase you use about Earth people, us, we, are so benighted. The Earth is the ghetto of the universe. We're the ghetto of the universe.
Well, in an extremely backward and obscure part of the Milky Way galaxy, we're 30,000 light years from the center of the galaxy. We're in the galactic boondocks.
This whole galaxy is only one of probably hundreds of billions of other galaxies, a useful calibration of our place in the universe.
There's also religion in science.
There is a tendency in both schools of thought to think that they have a corner in the truth. I mean, a way to look at it is the following. Science and religion on some level are after the same thing. Take the question of our origins. Both science and religion attempt to approach this question. But the religions all contradict each other, so they can't all be right. The Judeo-Christian Islamic religion holds that the world is about 6,000 years old. You just count up the baguettes in the Old Testament. It's very clear, 6,000 years old. The Hindus have an infinitely old universe with an infinite number of creations and destructions of the whole universe. Now, those two major religions can't both be right. How do you tell which is right and which is wrong? Well, the only way is to appeal to the natural world around us. And the natural world around us shows that the Earth, for example, is about 4.6 billion years old, nothing like 6,000 years old. So a literal reading of the Bible simply is mistaken. I mean, it's just wrong. It's just wrong. As a work of science, it is flawed. It's the science of the Babylonians in the 6th century BC, and we've learned something since then.
So I lose sleep over this, and I've always wanted to be in the company of a leading biologist to get insight into this. We, as an astrophysicist, we've seen throughout time the hubris that comes with any discovery that gets made, or the hubris that prevents the acceptance of a discovery that might demote your sense of self from whatever you previously imagined it to be. Among them is, where is Earth? Is it the center of all things? No, it's not even a significant planet in orbit around an ordinary star in the corner of a ordinary galaxy, one of 100 billion galaxies in the universe. And so here we are saying, let's search for life in the universe, intelligent life like us. Well, who are we to say that we're intelligent? I mean, I pose that not as a joke question, but it's a very serious question. We define ourselves to be intelligent in ways that no other creature can rival. Okay, now what do we credit that intelligence to? So you look at the genome, and let's take the chimp. I guess that's a really close relative of ours. And we have, what is it, high 90s% identical, indistinguishable DNA. And the chimp does not build the Hubble telescope, and the chimp does not compose symphonies. So we must then declare that everything we say about us that is intelligent is found in that 1.5% difference in DNA. Is that a fair statement to make? Okay. Let me invert that question. If the genetic difference between humans and chimps is that small, maybe the difference in our intelligence is also that small. Yeah. Maybe the difference between stacking boxes and reaching a banana, putting up an umbrella when it rains, whatever are these rudimentary things a chimp does that the primatologists roll them forward and boast about, which of course our toddlers can do, maybe the difference between that and the Hubble telescope is as small as that difference in DNA, because I pose the question. Suppose there was another life form on Earth or elsewhere, that in that same sort of vector, that 1.5% difference we are to chimps, suppose they were 1.5% different from us. They would then roll the smartest of us in front of their humatologists and say, Hawking, there's Hawking, oh, this one is slightly smarter than the rest of them because he can do astrophysics calculations in his head. Like little Timmy over here. So I wonder if we're just blithering idiots in the presence of even a trivially smarter species than us. So therefore, who are we to even assert that, number one, we are intelligent and we're looking for others at least as intelligent as us out there to talk to? By the way, is there any other species on Earth that we can talk to? Can we have a conversation with a chimp? That has nearly identical DNA, and I don't think we can actually say, hey, what movie do you want to see tonight? You don't have that conversation with a chimp, yet somehow we want to believe that an alien on another planet that's not even based on DNA, and even if it is, it's not nothing like us, that we could communicate with it.
Yeah.
I'm screaming at you. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean,
so what do you? So there.
Well, I'm all for. Yeah, I'm
Are
all
we
for,
as stupid as I'm saying?
I'm all for deflating hubris, but I mean, it's also true, of course, that our brains are anatomically very, very much bigger than chimps, and so that also is contained, must be contained in some sense in that tiny little percentage of DNA. I think the way to look at the DNA problem is to say that the sort of DNA that has been sequenced and the sort of thing on which we base that calculation of the 98% is. If you look at again, look at a computer, and you'll find that most of the programs that are written are at the machine code level are calling up the same set of subroutines. There's a subroutine for pulling down menu bars and a subroutine for moving windows and so on. That's what we're looking at in this 98%. What we're not looking at is the set of sort of high-level instructions that say, call this subroutine now call this one, now call this one, now call that one. It's not just humans and chimpanzees. All mammals have pretty much the same repertoire of genetic subroutines. And it's the difference between a man and a mouse, like the difference between a man and a chimpanzee, is the order in which they're called, the sequence in which they're called during embryology, which causes the really quite substantial anatomical differences between a human and a mouse, and the quite big differences in brain size.
If we assume we're not some measure of things, then, as I said earlier, that tells me that the day might come where we could go in, understand which sequences are called in what way, and invent whole new sequences never before dreamt of by biology.
Yeah, absolutely.
Empowering us in ways never before
known. Very, very
of.
difficult. It's much more difficult than it sounds, but still it's in principle possible. But the other point about intelligent life in the universe, never mind how we define intelligence, we're only going to encounter them if they are intelligent enough either to come here, which is very difficult indeed, or to send radio transmissions to us, which is a lot easier, but still requires. Let's just define it as the quality that you need in order to send information across the universe. Now, you don't have to call that intelligence, but whatever it is, that's what it needs in order to get here, in order for us to apprehend it.
And I wonder, surely you've walked past a worm that had just crawled out of the earth, and when you did so, you weren't saying to yourself, gee, I wonder what that worm is thinking. You just simply didn't care. You're so far beyond I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm imagining you simply really don't care what the worm is thinking, and the worm, conversely, has no clue that you consider yourself intelligent. You're just this thing that went by. So can you imagine a species that has such high intelligence that the prospect of communicating with us is simply of no interest to them?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
And they go by and their intelligence is on such a level that we can't even recognize it as intelligence.
Yes, and moreover, I think it would more or less have to be that much ahead of us if we were ever to meet them, because we're never going to get there.
Yeah, we sure as hell not getting there.
So
see the NASA budget lately? It's not.
So anything that gets here has got to have a very, very highly developed technology, far more than we've.
That brings us to Stephen Hawking's concern about any civilization sufficiently advanced to visit us. What does that say about the consequence of that encounter?
Yeah.
And he's worried, of course, because he's taking his cue from the history of humans, with one has a more advanced technology than the other, and they visit. It almost is always bad for those with the lesser technology. And South America, one of the sort of more obvious examples in their first encounter with the Spaniards. So I don't know if I want to be the first one to shake hands, or shake whatever they're sticking forward. I don't know. I want to do it, but I still have my concern.
You say because this could cost money. You say, okay, you hear from somebody 10 light years away. But by the time you transmit back and forth, what is the value of that? I mean, if you have to sit around and wait for 50 years or 100 years to get an answer, they're saying, why? Well, what are you talking about? 100 years from now, who the hell is going to care? We're going to be gone.
Well, there's a lot of answers to that. It's a good question, but it's one worth pondering. For one thing, there's a lot of information in human society which goes only one way. Socrates talks to us. We don't talk to Socrates. That's what books are about. People who are dead convey their wisdom to us.
So somebody could transmit the knowledge of another planet and just send the direct knowledge.
And think of that. Think of a civilization on a different planet evolved under quite different circumstances than here. What is their art like, their music, their science, their technology, their politics? What have they learned? Have they been in contact with still other civilizations? Do they have a repository of such information? Think of how we'd be able to view ourselves in a new way, suddenly to have a new perspective. There's another aspect to it too, and that is we are at a very dangerous moment in human history. We have weapons of mass destruction. We are in the process of inadvertently altering our climate and exhaustion of fossil fuels and mineral, all kinds of problems which come with technology. We are not certain that we will be able to survive this period of what I like to call technological adolescence. Were we to receive a message from somewhere else, it would show that it's possible to survive this kind of period, and that's a useful bit of information to have.
Yeah, wouldn't this be something? In other words, somebody has solved a particular problem we are still wrestling with.
It's good to know that the problem could be solved. I think it would be very, very useful information.
Or some of the medical breakthroughs, some way to end wars or something like that?
Maybe. Medical breakthroughs are tougher because I suspect our physiology would be quite different from that of any other creatures, if there are some. Also, it's possible that you'd make such a search and the results would be negative. That's perfectly possible. You don't want to prejudge the outcome. But it seems to me that's an important bit of information also.
Right.
If it turns out that life, intelligent life, is rare, that makes something particularly precious and valuable about life here.
How many photographs are taken every day? Everybody's got a smartphone, right? Almost everybody. High resolution. And if you're not taking a photo, you're taking a video. And so if there's something unusual and interesting, you're taking a video of that. You'd think an alien encounter would be rare, but you've got a smartphone and you can stream it. In the old days, when people said, did you take pictures of the alien that abducted you? Yeah, but they stole the film. Or I got the film home and the whole roll was blank because the alien zapped it or whatever. So it's a recording device, but a streaming device is not a recording device. So you can live stream whatever is happening. All right. So you would expect, given how many reports of abductions there were, right, of decades past, that somebody would have that on, that'd be posted by now, and it hasn't been. So this leads me to think strongly that people's imaginations got the better side of their life experience when they came back to report on having been abducted.
An alien that can cross the galaxy, we're worms to them, okay? I mean, just think to yourself what this is. Oh, we're going to put this in there. We think it's going to work, and we hope they don't shoot it down with their jets. I just give aliens more credit.
You're saying, because when you
know another one? People say, oh, the alien has a crash landing site over here. Really? Once again, the aliens crossed the galaxy and crashed?
So you're making a point that is scientific in nature, which is you're reminding everyone that if they got here beyond what we can see, then they probably traveled light years. They would be some different level.
A whole other level than sticking floaties in our atmosphere. That's all. Plus, we have crowdsourced any possible alien invasion on this Earth. Because there's 6 billion smartphones in the world, and everybody can take a high-resolution still frame or video camera. We have 1 million people at any moment who are airborne, who can look out their windows.
So that then goes to something we've talked about.
So I'm just saying, I need better evidence than just we don't know what it is, therefore it's alien.
Well, this goes to something that you're so good at, which is you're talking about the empirical and epistemological nature of this era, that unlike, say, 1,000 years ago where you couldn't get from continent to continent and you didn't have real-time information, you're saying there's more evidence than ever that currently does not support intelligent life out there.
You can live stream anything your camera sees. Because in the old days, what happened to the camera? Well, the alien zapped it, so it didn't work. You can live, thanks to the ACLU and police conduct, we can live stream whatever's in front of us, all right? And so in doing so, if an alien walked towards you, that would be viral. Look, cat videos go viral. If I have a high resolution image of an alien walking out of a spaceship,
let's go.
You'd be or the janitor at Area 51, get a shot. Yeah, he'd lose his job the next day, but it'd be the wealthiest
most famous janitor there ever was.
So are you more convinced now than before that there's not current alien life out there?
That's a perfect way to say it. I would say our capacity to detect alien life with the crowdsourcing of eyes on Earth tells me that is less convincing than ever before. Correct. And just because you see something in the sky and you don't know what it is, it does not mean that you know what it is. Yeah. Think about it. People do this. Wow, lights in the sky. I don't know what it is. It must therefore be aliens visiting from another planet. You just said you don't know what it is. That's the end of the conversation. By the way, go out, keep checking, grab them. I don't want to stop you. Go.
No, I know you're not stopping anyway.
Get the aliens.
In conclusion,
bring them into the town hall.
In conclusion, no to predictions, no to aliens, yes to fusion someday.
Yes.
You don't think that aliens would find us interesting enough to go through all the trouble to visit us and so forth. And I remember after, he talked about it, he kind of, spoke down on you in a way, and he just disagreed with you. He goes, of course aliens would find us interesting. We find algae interesting, and,
No, algae experts find algae interesting. It's that subset of the botanists, of that subset of the scientists who find algae interesting. Everybody finds aliens interesting, okay? So it's a matter of scale. But who am I to know what would or wouldn't interest an alien? What I would say is, what kind of an ego must you have to think that a more advanced species, vastly more advanced than we are, as it would have to be if it traveled here, we haven't left low Earth orbit in 50 years. What kind of an ego does it require to believe that aliens would cross the galaxy just to observe us in a very shy way? Okay, like crop circles and all this, that happened when no one was looking.
Yeah, crop circles I've never believed in.
Okay, all right, or when we visit Earth, let's only go to the restricted airspace where the Navy flies, and let's make ourselves fuzzy.
The astronomers have long been the leading theorists on the possibility of life in outer space. Astronomer Carl Sagan is consultant to a current Air Force scientific panel. Astronomer Thornton Page was on a CIA committee that investigated UFO reports in 1952. Its conclusion? No evidence of UFOs.
Our panel was expected to be, and I think was, objective in its approach, and tried to evaluate all the reports without saying they're ridiculous in advance. That has been repeated quite recently, and that is a good reason for talking with Carl Sagan here, because he's in the same position that I was, being the only astronomer in a similar panel.
There's not a single verified or checked out report which is at all connectable with the possibility of extraterrestrial life. It doesn't say that I think extraterrestrial life is impossible. Quite the contrary. I think that many of the stars in the sky have planetary systems. We know enough now about the origin of life to make it appear likely that life arises naturally on the vast bulk of these planets. It's possible, but by no means certain, that life on many of these planets evolves into beings which are as advanced as we, or more advanced. And I don't see any reason why we can't imagine that there are civilizations thousands or millions of years in advance of ourselves, capable of technical feats that we can hardly imagine. If you would believe, as the flying saucer cultists would have us believe, that the majority of the saucer reports are due to visitations, then you have a very strange situation. That means several spaceships are coming to the Earth over interstellar distances every day, as if all the anthropologists in the world were to converge on one of the Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean because they just invented the fishnet there or something. I think it's much more reasonable if you want to speculate on the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence, that there are very rare visits from extraterrestrials to the Earth. There's no evidence for this. I just say that's not implausible. But to have several visits a day, I think, is straining credulity. I think a key to what's behind the real belief in flying saucers is most easily obtained if you look at the contact myths. There are several hundred people in the United States who claim to have had personal contact with the inhabitants of flying saucers who have landed. And if you examine these myths, you find that there are some peculiar regularities. The inhabitants of saucers are benevolent. I mean, they're really concerned for our well-being. They're omnipotent, extremely powerful, omniscient, extremely knowledgeable, and they often wear long white robes. Now, this combination is something I've heard in another context. This isn't science, this is religion. And what I suspect is happening is this. We live in very unsettled times. It used to be possible to believe in a personal, benevolent, powerful, all-knowing God who cared about individuals, who you could pray to. But now, there's very few people who really believe that, I think. Science, for good or for ill, has destroyed a lot of the traditional theologies. And yet people have the same needs to believe that they always did, perhaps more so because of the times we live in. Well, the flying saucer myths are a really clever compromise. It's a way of having beings that come from the sky, that are worried about us, that are powerful, that are going to step in and prevent us from destroying ourselves, as we very well might, and yet have it in the cloak of science, so that no one can say nonsense that doesn't match science. It's all very pseudo-scientific. I would think that that at least for the contact myths, and probably for a lot of the events of people who just see things they don't understand flying overhead, that what's involved psychology and theology, and not so much the physical sciences.
If we find life out there, and it's not us, we will deem it not intelligent. But what may be equally as likely is that we find life that's vastly more intelligent than we are. If that's the case, we are putty in their hands. There's nothing, our greatest thoughts will be things that their toddlers do. And so they would run circles around us, and some fun science fiction stories portray Earth as that this has already happened, and Earth is just their zoo. We're all just a zoo for these intelligent creatures. And if they're smart enough, they can construct a zoo so that we would never even know we're in one. Isn't that kind of what we do in our zoos? You know, the penguins are in a place where you paint some icebergs. You know, we think that they don't know. So if we find some creatures not as smart as we are, I think they would make interesting subjects to explore what they're made of, how they work, what's their biology, what do they eat? Do they eat? Maybe they just receive sunlight. There's a famous science fiction story, forgive me, I forgot who wrote it, called They're Made of Meat. And these were aliens who came to visit Earth, and they found humans not only being made of meat, but they eat other creatures on the planet. And we take that for granted, that we eat other life. But given the sun as an energy source, in principle, you could use the sun as energy. When we sort of do, that's what it means to get energy from plants. And in fact, we're all solar powered in that sense, but very indirectly so. And imagine another species where they power their bodies from sunlight, and they come and see us gnashing on each other's ribs for food. It makes us look pretty primitive. It's time to get more and better data. Okay, so now, in science, do you know why science exists? Because the human sensory system sucks. That's why science exists. That
makes sense.
All right? We can see bands of light that your retina cannot. We can see things dimmer than the sensitivity of your cones can pick up, the cones in your eye. We can, the rods and cones, right, for detecting color and and brightness. Those fail when you're trying to see things that are dim and outside of the range of what we call visible light. And this is stuff we didn't even know existed until scientists discovered it. We discovered X-rays and ultraviolet and gamma rays and radio waves and microwaves. That's all light. Okay, we have telescopes honed into those windows to the universe, and we drink in these phenomena and then convert them to ways that our senses can then detect them. We make a photo, we have chart recorders, this sort of thing. Point is, the advance of science and civilization with it came about primarily because we invented machines to replace our sensory system, because it fails so badly.
And look, why do we have whole books on, what do you call them, on optical illusions, right?
Right.
Those are fun. Nobody doesn't love a good optical illusion. Right. And what is an optical illusion? It's, there's a line, and it's simple, right? It's simple line drawing on a white page. Oh, is that line bigger than the other one? I don't know. Are they the same size? Oh my gosh. Look how easy it is to fool you. And this is just a simple line drawing. Now I'm going to have something complicated in Twilight, where in a sky where you've never seen, and now I'm expecting you to give me an accurate account of what just happened. No. So in science, eyewitness testimony is the lowest form of evidence there is. In fact, it's so low we basically don't accept it.
Wow.
So when you see people say, this was a Navy pilot who's trained and he's a credible witness for what he saw,
you're saying
species check.
You're saying that guy is just as much a dumbass as anybody standing on the ground. That Navy pilot or not, being a human being, he's susceptible to the same perception bias that anybody else is.
Perception bias. And that's not purposeful, Right. They're not trying to, it's just the consequence of the human being trying to make sense of their world. And when things don't make sense, we have the urge to make it make sense so that we can think about it in some way that's consistent with our life experience. So I've had people say, I saw this bright light in the sky. It was huge. So no, they meant it was just bright, because the vocabulary is. I saw this light and it was a few inches above Marty's Deli. What do you mean a few inches? Was it an angle? It was in the sky. So even our capacity to retell things is compromised because we're human. All right. So all I'm asking for is, among the 6 billion images and videos uplifted to the internet every day that are high resolution, it'd be nice if a few of them had an alien getting out of their spacecraft. or you going up to greet the, give me some footage of that, some high-res videos. But you don't have that. What you have is, lately, fuzzy Navy video. Right. Monochromatic. And so, by the way, we as scientists, we'd love to meet the aliens. I have no problems with this. We just need better evidence than your credible witness. I just need better evidence than your fuzzy video. But anyhow, I'm ready for them. Bring them on. And it just seems to me, if we'd be visited, more than the Navy would notice it.
One thing that a lot of people are talking about lately, and NASA even now has a head of UFOs, right? Congress has a hearing on UFOs. And so people were talking about UFOs and aliens in a more serious way than being on the front of the National Enquirer, the way it used to be. So a Mexican journalist displayed bodies of 2 supposed non-human beings in front of the Congress in Mexico, okay? Each with 3-fingered hands and elongated heads.
Well, first of all, I like what they did in Mexico. They had what they claimed are alien bodies. They brought it out in front of their Congress. That's better than leaving them in a locked box and saying you and no one else can get to see them. So that's a start. But in science, a new truth, an objective truth, is only established when multiple labs can analyze whatever your claim is. When we brought rocks back from the moon, we distributed them to all the labs of the world. So everybody participated in that discovery. So here, bring out samples to others and let other people, skeptical people in other labs, test this. They'll either verify it or falsify it, and then we move on.
What was your reaction when you saw the images?
I was surprised because if they're from another planet, why do they look so human? They have 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, shoulders, hips, femur, a rib. Why? Most life on Earth shares DNA in common with us. It looks nothing like us. So how could it somebody? So that was my first thought. Second, any corpses or mummified remains, there is no bone in your nose. It's an open hole into your skull. These aliens have intact noses, okay? if indeed that is their nose. Okay, I don't know for sure. So, that's odd after 2,000 years to still have a nose with two cavities in it. So that's odd, but they should share it. That's how we determine what is true and what is not.
If there are other civilizations which are older than our own and have got much further than we have, they must have very advanced technologies. And I wonder what forms these technologies take.
Well, again, very difficult to estimate, but there are stars which are billions of years older than our sun. Some of them very likely have planets, and therefore I can imagine civilizations immensely beyond the capabilities of our own. What capabilities those are, no one can tell, in the same sense that even the most fantastic prognostications from the middle of the 19th century about the technology of the 20th century all fell short. People like Jules Verne, asked to imagine what transportation devices people would have in 1950, imagined a kind of Victorian living room with plush velvet furniture in a gondola at the bottom of an enormous balloon which went from New York to San Francisco in only a few weeks. And he was, of course, the most imaginative speculative thinker of the 19th century. Others would have been more cautious. So it's very difficult to predict far into the future, even 100 years, when not only new technology, but new scientific principles may be discovered.
So far, we've been talking about contact either by radio or direct physical contact by space probes. But there might be other means of doing it. It does, I know, sound very like science fiction to talk about teleportation or thought travel. But do you think this is entirely out of the question at the moment? And if so, should we be considering it seriously?
Well, there's very little in science which is absolutely out of the question. But I don't know of any evidence which suggests that we should invest a lot of time and money on those particular ventures, although I would not oppose anyone who thought that it was a useful investment of his time.
Then what should we be doing about this research?
I would say that there are several lines of approach, all of which look promising and should be pursued further. One is laboratory work on the question of the origin of life, making the molecules which here were able to reproduce themselves and led eventually to us. Secondly, a study of the organic chemistry in places like Jupiter, comets, and the interstellar medium. It's remarkable that the molecules of life are littering the cosmos. Thirdly, the space vehicle exploration of the neighboring planets, in particular for life or life-related compounds. If it turns out, for example, that Mars is lifeless, that is not a major disappointment, because then we have two planets near each other in space and time, life developed on one and not on the other. You have the classic case of an experiment and a control, and it'd be very important to investigate why life on the Earth and not on Mars. But even more exciting would be if Mars turns out to have life, for us to investigate what kind of life it is, how similar, how different from life on Earth. That will immensely broaden the science of biology. And then there is certainly the serious work, long-term, patient, cautious investigation of other stars for possible signals being sent our way.
After all, we have made a start. And I'm thinking, of course, of Pioneer 10, which has bypassed Jupiter and is now on its way out of the solar system. Carrying a plaque with a message.
Yes, that's right. Pioneer 10 is the first interstellar spacecraft of mankind, but only by accident. That is, it was designed to examine Jupiter and came so close to Jupiter that it was ejected from the solar system by Jupiter's gravity. That being the case, we thought it would be a nice idea to have a kind of cosmic greeting card on it in the remote contingency that it were at some future time to be intercepted by some advanced civilization. And so a 6 by 9 inch gold anodized aluminum plaque was designed, which has a mysterious part and an obvious part to it. The mysterious part is the man and the woman to the right of the plaque. And they will be mysterious because there will not be men and women anywhere else. The rest of the message we think is written in galactic clear, in the one language we have in common with everyone else, namely the language of science. And it essentially indicates the planet from which the spacecraft was launched, the star around which that planet goes. Out of the several 100,000 million stars in the galaxy, it specifies one, and the year of launch out of the 10,000 million year history of the galaxy. And it does it by reference to a set of galactic clocks called pulsars. Well, the chance of this being intercepted is small, precisely because space is so empty. It's traveling so slowly, even though it's the fastest thing we've ever launched, that it will take it 80,000 years to get to the nearest star, but it's not headed towards the nearest star. So it will very likely survive for billions of years, but in the dark of interstellar space. It will be the oldest artifact of mankind, because a billion years from now, mountain building and erosion will have destroyed everything on the Earth, and yet this plaque will remain intact.
So, in fact, the plaque may last longer than the Earth itself, which is really rather a sobering thought.
Yes.
Carl, thank you very much.
Guys, I have a weird mysterious story that I might need your input on, and it's the perfect story to share on a video like this. The story has always sounded a little bit absurd to me given the improbabilities of all its details, so I've never really felt the need to share its details with anyone until today. Here it goes. I come from a community in East Africa in a region called Kitwe, Kenya, and when I was a child around 6 years old, my dad experienced something that to this day he claims he cannot explain. So, on that fateful 2001 or 2002 night, my dad, who was a taxi driver at the time, was doing his last round, and it just so happened that his passengers were friends he had grown up with. It's not a big community, so that wasn't anything out of the ordinary. So, as they're driving to their destination, the four of them, according to my dad, a beam of light all of a sudden appears in the middle of the road about 500 meters ahead, and it's shining towards them. Now, needless to say, they're instantly taken aback, and they can clearly discern that it's not a car, which would have been the only logical explanation given it's a remote location and it's almost the middle of the night. So, what does my dad and his friends decide to do? Well, they decide to chase after the light, thinking that it must be some mischievous villagers with a powerful flashlight. So my father and his friends plan on teaching them a lesson, because what they're doing could easily cause an accident on the remote road. So they're driving as fast as possible towards the light, and after approximately 10 to 30 seconds, they notice they're not getting any closer to it. It's as if the light is moving at a similar speed away from them, all while staying perfectly in the middle of the road. So they keep it up for the next 3 minutes or so, and the light is still that same distance ahead of them. At which point, one of the friends in the car, who I guess had been nervous this whole period, decides to speak up and asks, what the do you think we're doing chasing a mysterious light in the dead of night and at full speed, man? That was apparently what snapped them back, and they realized, yeah man, we are crazy for this. So they slowed down and left the main road at their next exit, which was the last time they saw the light. My dad has always shown that this is true, and not just him, his friends collaborated the stories as well. Approximately a decade ago, I had the chance to ask each one of them to recount their story, and they're all consistent. Now, that's not even the weirdest part of this story. I've always taken an interest in the wild and mysterious myself. I even at one point ran a channel on YouTube which was based on historical legends, myths, and superstitions. And over time, I would learn that this phenomenon wasn't unique to my dad and his friends, actually. A lot of people within our community have experienced weird phenomena at some point in their lives, and most of their accounts have something to do with weird lights, either beams or mysterious balls of light appearing where they shouldn't and behaving in mysterious manners. So what do you guys think, man? I personally don't believe there was anything supernatural about these phenomena. Obviously, there must be a logical explanation, but I do believe that at least some of these accounts are perfectly true. They can't all possibly be lying. But again, I do not think there necessarily was anything otherworldly about them. If we as humans have learned anything over the last century, it's that nature can indeed be stranger than fiction. Think about sailing stones, man, glowing caves, blood falls, fire rainbows, light pillars, etc., man. What conclusions do you think people came to when they experienced any of these things before the age of information and the internet? They'd all attribute these things to something superstitious, obviously. Anyway, having said that, I really wish I'd know what could have caused any of those freaky lights, but unfortunately, you can never count on my government to invest in demystifying such phenomena, which is such a shame, man. So, guys, do you think aliens exist? Now that you've just spent an hour listening to two of some of the smartest individuals to ever speak on the subject, and it just so happens their profession involves space, which I believe is the highest authority that can confidently speak on such matters. So, for me personally, if you asked me, I'd give you a two-part answer. Do aliens exist somewhere in a vast universe? Yeah, more than likely, man. I mean, you've all heard the analogy that goes, saying aliens do not exist because we've not found any after decades of exploring space is equivalent to scooping a spoonful of water from the ocean and coming to the conclusion that fish do not exist because you cannot see any on the spoon. That is insanity, man. And by the way, while we are on this topic, I have a question that I've never been able to understand myself. And I sincerely apologize if my thoughts are all over the place and I'm just rambling. So, here my question goes. We already know that the cosmos is made up of two distinct mysterious substances, which are dark energy and dark matter, where dark matter is what's holding everything in the universe, like Earth, where it should be, while dark energy is responsible for the extreme and rapid expansion of the universe. But what is the universe expanding into, man? I know it might sound like a silly question to some of you, but I personally feel like we've normalized the understanding that the universe is expanding such that no one no longer cares to ask what it's expanding into. Or perhaps the answer to this has long been established and I just haven't happened to come across it. So yeah, or maybe I just had a thought, maybe the planetary bodies at the end of the universe are just colliding into one another. Like you usually see in a highway accident where you have cars on this end colliding into one another, but the cars several kilometers away on the other side are moving at the same speed they were without any idea what's happening on this at the end where the accidents are happening. Yeah, call that my uneducated theory, man. Now, back to my second answer when asked whether I believe aliens exist. Yes, I believe they exist. But do I believe aliens have ever visited Earth? I highly doubt that, man. Man, given how decentralized societies and governments across the world are today, I'm 100% sure that if aliens really did exist, we'd have way more believable and undeniable proof than grainy videos taken from military planes, for example. And as for these UFOs, man, we all know governments are capable of creating some of the freakiest things today, and I'm just talking about the declassified stuff. I mean, do you guys remember the heart attack gun that the CIA revealed in the 1970s, man? What the f*** ever happened to that? Yeah, basically my point is all these UFO claims have government experiments written all over them, and that's why also the US government shows up every single time there is one of these sightings. They're just there to make sure no confidential information leaks, and when people blame everything on UFOs, the situation just works itself out for them. Yeah, anyway. So yeah, that's it, guys, from my end. Thank you for sticking with me to the end, and I'd really love to know what you think about the whole UFOs subject. Where do you stand? And if you have an answer for me regarding the expanding universe thing, I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Thanks a lot, man. In the meantime, thank you. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace, man.